What is going on, everybody? Anon here, and happy Saturday night. So, first of all, the thumbnail for this video has been cracking me up the entire time. But I'm starting to see a lot of red flags start to rear their ugly heads again with Wizards of the Coast and Hasbro and what they're doing with Magic the Gathering. And the reason the thumbnail was kind of funny is, obviously Cynthia Williams is available, but, putting her head on Godzilla, lighting a bunch of Timmys dressed as Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Spider-Man, and Avatar. It's just a little entertaining. But on a serious note, I want to talk because I see 11 red flags right now, and it's really starting to scare the crap out of me because I think they've done a couple nice things that have worked, but the jury's still out on whether it was intentional or if it was by accident. And what we're seeing now going forward is really reversion to the mean. So I'm going to jump around a couple different tabs here. So it's kind of going to be what it's going to be. But the first of which, and this is the obvious one, I actually put a video out back in March of 2025, kind of predicting the fact that they would shoot themselves in the foot here. Because again, they're a public company. They are executives who they live and die by the quarter. And by Q3, they're going to have their foot on the gas to try to get their bonus and their stock grants and vesting and stuff in 2025. And that's exactly what we're seeing. So, it's not like it's any sort of myth, but we'll go through these one at a time. So the removal of serialized cards in Spider-Man, Avatar, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, obviously this happened with Edge of Eternities also. So I'm going to, let's go to the first one here. And this is the Wizards WPN. And this is a cool website because it gives you all the pack arts and everything. So with Avatar, it says headliner 1% boosters. Now with Lorwyn, we saw this spoiled in Atlanta. I think that was last week or the week before. And we can see here, oh, that is a commander deck. I have that there for a reason, but we'll go back to that. Serialized card. And you can see on the box it says serialized card. Go back to the commander deck. I'm not trying to bury the lead. So, and the universes within, they have the serialized card back in the set, presumably to keep interest. But here in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, let's look what this says. Borderless signature, Kevin Eastman headliner card. What the fuck is that? So my theory is that Edge of Eternities didn't have serialized cards because they had to knee-jerk move printing of commander collector boxes from Japan to the U.S. because it was right in the middle of all this tariff stuff. And for those of you who don't remember, there was a lot of saber rattling about 100% import tariffs from Japan and this and that. And look, there's obviously ways to get around it import-wise, but when you're a larger company, you tend to be slow, lazy, and not super innovative. So, yeah, it's much easier just to move the printing to the US. Now, Spider-Man, they should have been able to, if they weren't able to print serialized cards in Edge of Eternities, they should have had enough time to figure it out. So that leads me to my next point. Potentially, they didn't serialize the Soul Stone because obviously the one rumor is either Ravensburger with Lorcana or Fanatics with Marvel had some sort of exclusivity license with serialized cards in Marvel, and they weren't legally able to do it. Technically, when those items come up and there's enough money to be made, the parties can figure out and settle on middle ground, especially since there are multiple sets of Marvel coming out. So while it's super plausible, and it's definitely possible, I'm not sure I buy that, quite honestly. So you have the removal of serialized cards in Spider-Man. You also have them in Avatar. Look, we don't know for sure in Avatar, but they are doing neon ink cards in Avatar similar to the Chocobos or the different Spider-Man mans, whatever you want to call them, in Spider-Man. And the same as the Neon Dynasty, Kamigawa. ones. So presumably there's no serialized cards in Avatar either. And then Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, we just saw they're doing Weiss-like gold stamp signatures on the card. This is the most bizarre crossover ever. If Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Magic the Gathering wasn't bizarre, Magic the Gathering and Weiss Schwartz is very bizarre. So they're coming up with all these gimmicks. They're coming up with all these gimmicks because they knew 100% that they weren't going to have serialized cards in the set, presumably because they didn't know what the demand was going to be, and they want to print as much of this shit as possible. And it is in their best interest, and this brings me to my next point, as they push more direct to consumer, and I've talked about this multiple times, it is in their best interest to print to MSRP and not $1 above. Because now that they've instituted MSRP, and if you guys recall, on Amazon, the prices have traditionally adjusted for all this Magic stuff all over the place. Like we've seen Commander Legends, the old school Commander Legends boxes at like $750, well over what any reasonable person would assume MSRP were to be. But since they don't have a stated MSRP, it seems like they're kind of a little cavalier or carte blanche with how they price things. It seems like it almost goes into the Amazon algorithm. But with this new MSRP, everything they are doing is at the MSRP number. Unless the product is below MSRP, then there is a little bit of a floating price point. So, for example, the Spider-Man play boxes have been up and down all over the place. Same with Edge of Eternities. But the Edge of Eternities collector boxes, for example, were $2.99 in, I think, every single instance, even when the price was above that. The same with Final Fantasy. They were $4.55. And with Spider-Man, they were $4.55 the entire time. Now, they did come down to $4.29 at one point in time. I'm assuming that was a discount to move the product. Because what's interesting about Spider-Man is the release date was 4 days before the end of their Q3. And I think they got spooked and they panicked. Because they had a lot of cancellations on the product. So inherently, the reason why I say it's in their best interest to print to MSRP and not $1 above is because any dollar above MSRP, that goes to the secondary market. They don't get those dollars. So from their standpoint, it's like, well, why do we even want to create that scenario out of the gate? Because we could print more, get the price down, and we could collect all the money as Hasbro. You know, it's kind of capitalism 101. But when the price cratered because everybody found out there was no serialized card in the set, which, again, the market loses confidence in the product, and you see what we saw. Now, people can say that Spider-Man, you know, going to distro at $300 a box and coming out right around MSRP or $500 is a huge victory. It is, except for in this instance where Hasbro, they're basically high-fiving each other because they were selling all of these fucking boxes on Amazon at MSRP when they were only selling them for like $240, whatever the price is to distribution. So they're like, yeah, we cracked the fucking code. You know, this is like the next Pokemon Center. We're going to crush it. We're all going to get paid and buy yachts and shit. And then when everybody found out that there weren't any serialized cards, they all canceled the orders. And just a quick accounting lesson for you folks. So if Wizards of the Coast sells product through Amazon, it's effectively consignment. So until that customer pays for that product on a credit card, it's not a sale. It's still Hasbro and Wizards of the Coast inventory. However, if they sell the product to distribution, the title transfers the second that they receive the product. I'm sure there's scenarios at the end of the quarter where they're shipping late, where they're signing agreements, and where they're transferring title of the product before it leaves Wizards warehouse, and Wizards is indemnifying them for any losses in transit. All that happy shit happens. But since all these orders got canceled, presumably Hasbro went from crushing their quarter to losing millions of dollars of profit because they didn't sell the product. Went from sold to unsold, like in a split second, for tens of thousands of boxes, if not, well, probably not more, but certainly tens of thousands of boxes. So distribution got this magical second wave, And the first rep I talked to, he's like, yeah, we think these got stuck in customs, and I'm like, they're printed in the fucking USA. They didn't get stuck in customs. You didn't know about them because there was never any intention to go to you guys. So we got this massive dump of product, which was, in my best estimate. Now, look, we got like 80% of what we got in the initial wave. I don't think it was probably 50%, maybe a little bit less than what the initial wave was. But presumably, 50% of the product, they're probably taking half of the overall product and they're going direct to consumer now. But yeah, distribution got the product and they're like, hey, we got all these boxes in that we didn't think we were going to get because WOTC had to sell them the distribution or it wouldn't get booked in their Q3. And that would have been an absolute fucking disaster. So it just goes to show you. Now, they could have held the product back and they could have sold it over time on Amazon and made way more money, but the timing didn't work. So again, this is an action from a publicly traded company where they made the decision to sell product immediately at a lesser margin to book the revenue and the profit in Q3, as opposed to doing the intelligent business move, which is what they do every single effing time. So that being said, we have this Amazon dump of Spider-Man collectors at $425. Now, this is after everything cratered. This one's a little bit more difficult to explain, but if you think about how Amazon's logistics work, if you order a Magic the Gathering product, a lot of times you'll have it local pickup. So once it gets fed into the Amazon logistics system, it just gets dispersed and it goes out to all the different local locations, and that's pretty much it. So there's really no pulling that back. So presumably when they ran the sale to dump the product at $429, and I know some of this was actually in their Q4. Now, I don't know if they were playing games a little bit with returns and then resales. That could have been it. My guess is that's the product that couldn't be pulled back because it was already dispersed throughout Amazon's logistical process, and they just took the remaining returns and then they just dumped them on the market. So they wouldn't have to deal with it again. So that is why I think there aren't any serialized cards, because effectively they can print more and more and more. And yes, there are going to be some idiot Timmies that say, well, they said they don't reprint cards. You're a fucking idiot. They're going to reprint anything that they want to reprint. They said they specifically told you multiple times, we will never reprint the reserve list. And guess what they did? They fucking printed 30th anniversary because they're scummy and they're not truthful, because they are living and dying quarter to quarter, which is why collectible card games, tradable card games, whatever you want to call them, have no place being owned by a public company, especially when it's the only asset you have that isn't a flaming dumpster fire. We'll get to that one in a second. So the next item, which is very Cynthia Williams-esque, lazy ass products. So this Final Fantasy Holiday Chocobo bundle, it reminds me a lot of Double Feature. And I like Double Feature now. Back then, it's a lazy reskin piece of garbage. And quite honestly, you look at the Commander deck that's coming out, it's a lazy reskin piece of garbage. You look at the bundles, it's a bunch of play packs and a bunch of bullshit. Because I'm not sure. I mean, look, the scene cards are cool, but there's no chase, unless I'm missing something. Yeah, the Chocobo lands, whatever. But the reason why we have not gotten play boxes through distribution is because these guys were printing play packs out the ass to seed in these Final Fantasy holiday gift bundles. So presumably, and I did a video on this the other day, I'll just flip here very quickly. Based on 300,000 average collector boxes, I got these ratios through a couple of different distributors just based on high-level numbers. I'm not going to get into more detail than that. So this gives you the total estimated amount that is out in distribution. Now, look, half of these could be in direct-to-consumer, and that's one that we don't know, and these numbers could be double. But here's your pack count. So your 10 packs in the Chocobo bundles, the Japanese bundles, your 12 in the scene boxes, because these are actual cases. So the cases of 4, one of each. So here's your box equivalent divided by 30. So you have 110,000 boxes that were printed at the very least that went through distribution for these holiday bundles. The number is probably almost twice that, because I would imagine they're holding a shitload of these back for direct to consumer. So look, that's your reprint and then some. Now, 110 is obviously enough for 2 of the large distributors, maybe, and that would go very, very quickly. But twice that, you're looking at a full-fledged restock that's just evaporating into these holiday bundles, and then they have to do it all over again to get the end of November restock to distribution. They are, in fact, having challenges printing things quickly enough. And we will get to another one of those points here later on, because I spoke to 2 gentlemen directly at Wizards of the Coast, and I don't think they realized what they told me, but they told me. So moving on to the next one. In Avatar and Weiss, Avatar has a neon chase, as I mentioned before, and and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles has the Weiss gold signature, and we just touched on those. These were done on purpose, obviously, because they knew they weren't going to have serialized cards, which again allows them to reprint these if they so choose. The end. Moving on, item 6. The 2026 calendar. We have financials we'll read, and then we have this real quick. Just make sure. Okay, good. Make sure I'm not talking about all this stuff and have to do it all over again. The 2026 calendar has 1 additional set. So there is, I think there were 7 sets last year and 8 this year or something like that. But there is 1 extra set. And by the way, supposedly Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles is a small set similar to Spider-Man, which again scares the shit out of me. It's also it's a smallish IP. It's certainly more prevalent than Avatar, but it's nowhere close to Spider-Man. So it's going to be a weird one, and it's kind of right in that Tarkir slot. And again, you're going into Q2, and their Q2 is going to be desperation mode next year because they have such a massive con. But anyway, they added a set, and then the next one. It seems to me like they're now shock lands or some sort of gimmick land in every universe's within set. So, we had all of the specialty lands in Edge of Eternities. We had shocks in Tarkir. And now we're going to have shocks in Lorwyn. So it's almost like they're just trying to goose the land cycle to set a floor of value for all these. But the problem is they keep reprinting all this shit with value. And then the value all gets mucked out. It's a little weird. But pay attention to that one, because it almost seems like they're running out of ideas, because they're not doing master sets anymore. But in spite of that, there's not a whole lot of value accruing in the cards, and even some of the higher value cards, they tend to erode over time. So it's a weird mechanic that we haven't seen for a long time. Item number 8, the continued use of external IPs to drive sales versus internal game development. So, for example, Spider-Man. Gameplay's, I've talked to a few people who they have fun playing the cards, but they really don't have any business playing the cards. There's nothing there other than a handful of cards, the Soul Stone, that are going to be Commander staples. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. They're selling it not based on the playability. They're selling it based on, you like fucking turtles, buy the cards. Same with Avatar. So it's almost like, hey, we'll sign a licensing deal with you. We'll give you 25 cents on the dollar of our profit. Just pulled that number out of my ass. It's a round number / rounding error. And we'll just print a bunch of cards, and your IP will sell it, and we'll pay you a royalty for the benefit of that. And we don't really have to develop the game. It's lazy because it has to be. They are in such an absolute high speed race to print cards out. And I'm not even going to touch on how many miserable secret layers there are. Like, holy shit, guys. And they actually touched on it in their Q2 press release, where they're like, oh yeah, we're making a lot of money off these secret layers and this and that. So they're diluting the market again, where they're going to get kicked in the nuts they're going to get their face ripped off, and they're going to have to go through the cycle all over again because they can't help themselves. They're stupid and they're greedy. And I feel like this is a scene from The Big Short. So moving on to number 9. Removal of commander deck sample packs. So I was in Fort Wayne, Indiana about 6 weeks ago, and I met with 2 gentlemen from Wizards of the Coast, and we were talking about reprints of commander decks and reprints of playboxes. And the one guy looked at me, he's like, I think we actually removed commander sample packs from commander decks. And I just played stupid because that struck me as odd. And I said, oh, really? Why is that? He said, oh, we were having issues printing and packing, and the sample packs themselves were bogging everything down. So we decided to scrap them because this way we only have 4 sheets. We can print them, we can package them, and we can print them so much more efficiently. And it gives us more print capacity to print play boosters. So straight from the horse's mouth, for those of you who now were curious why the commander sample packs are removed, it's because they wanted to speed up printing. They want to print more product. They don't give 2 shits if there's value in this after they sell it. That if it is, it's a nice to have. I'm sure if that happens, they're not upset. Now, if it happens too much, they're going to be pissed because, it's kind of like the Bernie Sanders meme. If I have $1 and you have $1, I have $2. And that's their mindset. Like, if you're making a buck off what we're selling you, we want that dollar, and we're going to figure out a way to take it. That was the whole Cynthia Williams issue, right? That I hate to say it, but it's that cigarette mindset. Once you open the pack and you get that high, you should have no value after that because, that's what you get and you're addicted. And it's a psychologically addicting thing. Now, obviously that doesn't work, and that's the way a sociopathic monster thinks. But it's a fine line between maximizing profits and not minimizing the future value of the cards of the folks that are buying the packs. Yeah, those 2 data points are absolutely at odds with each other. So I'm going to talk about 10 and 11, and then I'm going to go and point out some of the items in their financials, because I know dude from MTG Goldfish did a video about the financials, and quite honestly, I should do one. This is right in my skill set, my expertise for my day job. Quite honestly, I didn't really care that much because I know what's in there and it's not anything exciting. But they're going to have a massive year-over-year comp in 2026. So they need to get ready to sell as much as they can because they have the Final Fantasy and then the Tarkir Tale. Tarkir came out the end of March, and a lot of the sales ended up in Q2. And then just pure desperation. The rest of the company is a absolute dumpster fire. And we're going to go through those numbers. And the desperation isn't necessarily to grow quarter over quarter. It's even not as much to get their bonus and keep the stock price up. It's if they fuck up, they're going to have a bunch of large private equity ready to take them private and slit all their throats, because there's enough value in shutting everything else down or selling it to Mattel or somebody like that, where Wizards of the Coast is more profitable as a standalone than the rest of that dumpster fire shell and that overpaid bloated board. And all those pieces, and we're going to talk about that now. So let's go into this real quick. Oh yeah, and here's the commander deck. You can see here it says nothing about the sample pack. So this is our AK. So this is the public press release as of probably the close of the day on July 23rd. I don't know if they do their earnings call before the bell or after hours. I've written a lot of these. It's a lot of fun. So anyway, Hasbro's return to growth in the first half of 2025, blah, 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 blah. I'm not a big fan of this Chris Cox guy, and I don't know his background. I don't have anything against the guy. He hasn't really done anything results-wise other than, pump the shit out of Wizards and just let the rest of the business fall apart. And quite honestly, that's probably what their strategy is. So, why would you raise full year guidance? That's idiotic at this point. The bar is so low. Let's see. So, Magic the Gathering grew by 23%, driven by the release of Final Fantasy, which set a record for the biggest set release in Wizards history. So, I don't want to talk about any numbers here. I'll get into it in a second because I do want to make a counterpoint to, yeah, the company's bankrupt, blah blah blah. Hasbro's not bankrupt. Hasbro will never be bankrupt in the current state. It is a, I don't want to say it's a zombie corporation because it's not. It's not even on life support. It's making a couple pennies here and there, more than enough to refinance debt, pay debt down. You know, there are no financial landmines in the company because they're printing so much goddamn money with Wizards. And I'm going to go through that in a second. So again, revenue increased by 16%. Magic alone was 23%. And then you can see consumer products down 16%. Entertainment. When you think about this third segment, don't even think about it. It is so tiny. It's completely immaterial. Operating profit of $6 million. It doesn't matter if it's 6 million, 2 million, 60 million. It's a rounding error. Doesn't matter. So, yeah, we can talk about operating loss and this and that. But year to date, the operating loss is 620 million. Now, again, they have $84 million of interest expense and 80 some million dollars of taxes. That is real cost. So when they say operating loss, those items are pulled out. The same with EBITDA. Like that is actual cash going out the business. So you have to factor that in this instance. Now, if if you were a company that was rolling losses and you had, you know, you weren't paying taxes, it's a little bit of a different situation. But this $1 billion of non-cash goodwill impairment, to put this in the most simplistic terms, they acquired a business at some point in the past, and that business is now worth $1 billion less than what they paid for it. That's what this is. So it is a non-cash impairment, but they're basically saying, oh, you know what? That shit that we paid at least $1 billion for in the past, it's no longer worth $1 billion. So everybody in the world adds it back for the current period, which is appropriate, but it just means that the decision-making at the highest level of the corporation is subpar. You could say suboptimal if you want. So let's go down to the actual schedules here very, very quickly. And again, adjusted EBITDA is a made-up fucking number. There's no definition for it. And you do have interest and taxes and depreciation if you're manufacturing. Look, your depreciation and your CapEx, basically the assets that you're buying, generally speaking, in a steady state business, they equal out. So you're excluding any capital expenditures, but you are also excluding any depreciation. So you kind of get twice the benefit in EBITDA, especially in a capital intensive business. And these guys aren't too bad, but you know, it is a little bit. So 98 million of cash dividends in the second quarter. That's probably sustainable. Their operating cash looks like it's about 150,000 or so, or I'm sorry, 150 million or so per quarter right now. But again, let's go down here. So yeah, they have a bunch of debt. It's not that bad. You know, accrued liabilities, accrued payable. Those are just trade, other debt, 3.3. Current portion, long-term debt, 0. So everything's out 12 months. You know, there's no wall of debt coming due. I'm not pretty sure they just refinanced a bunch of stuff. And here, if you look at the 3 months ended, yeah, your net loss is 800K or 800K, but you want to pull in your interest expense, your income tax expense, because this is, you may not be paying the cash within the quarter, but it is cash that will be paid within the year. So a loss of 855 million, but you do have to back this $1,000,000,021 out. So you're basically at what, $170 million of operating profit for the quarter, which is okay. You know, that's after you're paying taxes, after you're paying interest. So it's not a fantastically healthy number, but it's a healthy number. You know, they're not crushing it, but they're certainly not going backwards. In this scenario, they will never, ever go bankrupt. The only fear is if they go stagnant and they're paying too much out in dividends, and then they're starting to not work down their debt load. That's when the stock can take a hit. And I mean, you know, we go into some sort of recession or some sort of pullback, bear market, whatever the stock market, the stock goes down to $50. There's going to be a lot of piranhas and sharks out there buying up some of the stock to try to strong arm these guys into breaking it into pieces. because there's a lot of value here if somebody can do it. So, and here's your cash flow from operations right here, 209. It's pretty. This is a pretty clean number. You can see here addition software, blah blah blah. So 90 million of additions in the quarter. Some of these items are probably a little extraordinary. Software development, PP&E. I need to look at it a little bit closer, but either way, net, you're 120 million. You're paying out, 196. So I'm assuming these are biannual payments, so they're paying twice a year. So either way, you're covering your dividend, your interest. There's a little bit left over, but here's where I really want to talk about it. So, we talked about how they basically made $170 million in the quarter. Well, Wizards made $241 million. And then you had the consumer products. You can basically back out the $1,021,000,000, but they still lost $8 million in consumer products and entertainment. This is where I said it's $16 million revenue. It doesn't fucking matter. Like, it's not even worth paying attention to. And then corporate, which is just a cost center, was $16.7 million. Now, look, a chunk of this is going to be stock options, stock-based comp, things like that. But yeah, it's still a fairly sizable chunk. Now, what's interesting is for the 3-month ended last year, corporate was a lot higher. So I'm assuming they probably had a bunch of stock comp expense hit last year or some sort of vesting. But again, I haven't looked at it close enough. And quite honestly, if you look at last year, the operating margin was actually higher for Wizards and digital gaming. So I'm guessing Monopoly Go was a higher percentage or a higher piece of this revenue last year, because I assume the margins on that are like 95%. So it's going to blend it up a little bit. You probably also have some additional costs in here for tariffs and stuff. Let's see, because there was some products that was still coming over from Japan, particularly Tarkir. And I don't recall if there were any issues at the point in time where they would have come over, but it doesn't matter. Neither here nor there. But long story short, Wizards is making all of their money. But again, they're not losing actual cash. They're generating cash. They're covering their dividend, their interest, or taxes. They're not going anywhere, but it's kind of a zombie because the rest of the business is it's a fucking shit show. Again, as I mentioned here, entertainment's a rounding error. I mean, I gotta get this 6 months, and then consumer products they're losing money year after year, and quite honestly, I think part of the reason why they're losing so much money is the margins are shitty, but they have to have such an astronomically large sales force, especially with toys. I mean, the toy business is just so hard. It's been hard for years, and even now, every kid's on their fucking iPad or their cell phone or on the on YouTube or whatever. People aren't playing with physical things like they used to be. It's just it's a dying industry. I don't want to say it's Blockbuster, but it's not Blockbuster. So, again, 6 months ended. They lost a bunch in Q1. There's probably another slight goodwill impairment in Q1, and Wizards is crushing it. So, Wizards is all of their profit. So, again, getting back to the sheet, they have a massive comp next year, and they're desperate. The rest of the company doesn't cover corporate. Consumer products is going to lose you probably $20 million a year, $25 million a year. I'm sure it's going to get worse in Q3 and Q4, depending on how much product they've imported from overseas. I assume it's going to be a shitty holiday season because the lower half of the economy is really, really rough right now. The entertainment business is a rounding error, so it's all Wizards. Corporate. It's going to come to a point where they're not going to cut any more people because it's good old boys network. So everybody's in the trenches looking for survival. So that is a very long-winded way of saying Wizards has started to regress, and they've gotten back to the point where they're starting to scare the shit out of me because A, they're getting desperate, and B, well, I mean, they're desperate, And they've made all of these changes and removed the collectability of products. They've removed the forced transparency into the limitation of print runs. So again, serialized cards don't necessarily mean anything by themselves. Yes, there's some value in there, but there is a level of confidence that they can't reprint them because they're serialized now. I mean, MetaZoo did it because they got caught doing it and then they lied about it. But you know, this is not MetaZoo. This is a real card game and real cards. So anyway, guys, just want to walk through this. I didn't do a video last night. I had some family stuff, and the night before I had a late hockey game I was playing. So I want to go a little bit more in depth and just talk through this because we're going to go through a rough patch here with Magic, I think. And I think, you know, we might turn into a little bit of a bear market. We might not. But they're going to have to pull their heads out of their asses here and get back to the direction they were going. Or it's going to start to hurt. And look, October 23rd, they're going to have their Q3 earnings call, and it's going to be very, very interesting to see how much ahead they were for the quarter, or how tight they were with all the sales that turned into not sales with Spider-Man, and see if those margins hold up in comp to Q2. So, all right, guys, hope you liked the video. Like it, subscribe, join the Discord, and have a good night.